Okay, so here we are, another week, another preview, focusing again on the under 40 players that fit in for a specialist side. First thing to note this week is that the increase in the number of covered fixtures has led to a quite significant increase in the prize pool here. So if we look at last week, it was a total of 300 prizes up for grabs. This week it's 450. So definitely worth considering this weekend and looking at building a team, particularly if you maybe already have one or two strong players that have great fixtures. So let's just dive straight into it, shall we? Goalkeeper, we're looking for Austria this week. So we've got Sahina. He plays for SV Ried, and he is this week facing the newly promoted side in the Austrian Bundesliga at home, which is, for an under 40 point goalkeeper, is probably the best you can hope for. If you look at it, he's got a pretty good AA game, even if he doesn't keep a clean sheet. When he doesn't concede 3 goals or an error leading to goal or a penalty, as he did last season, which is ultimately why he qualifies, he can put up some pretty big numbers. And if you think about this, if a goalkeeper in that under 40 slot can get you 50 plus points, then you are in a really strong position. So not really much more to say. It's literally the facilitator piece, and this week Radlinger really stands out for me. If you're looking to really double down on playing the fixtures and looking at the SV Ried playing against the newly promoted side, you could even consider stacking him up with Marcus Lackner. So Marcus is plays on the same side, allows you to run a defensive stack. For specialists, it's important to note that you can only run 2 players from the same team, but in this scenario this week, it's quite an interesting play, just considering the fact that they are facing a newly promoted side. Again, he's very inconsistent with his scores, but started off the new season well. Even in a 1-0 loss with no clean sheet last week, he put up 56 points. So as a quite exciting stack, which really is boom or bust play for specialists, I would be considering the SV Ried stack this week. It's quite an interesting one, and potentially not a popular choice. So one to consider how to differentiate yourself as more and more people become aware of the fact that specialist is basically paying out the best prizes. Specialist limited, the chance to win a star rare is just frankly incredible. So I think that we will see a trend towards this being probably one of the most prioritized lineups each week for managers. If you're not looking towards Austria, if you're looking for an alternative, we've got a couple of players. First one in Belgium is Gerardo Ortega of Genk. He again is a player that is fairly inconsistent. He is a fullback, but based on the changes to the matrix that have happened this week, fullbacks are getting a little bit of a boost. So Ortega might be an under 40 now. He might be more valuable as we sort of come into the sort of game week 300 and beyond, when the changes take effect. So he did only play 45 minutes in the last weekend against Club Brugge, but as a starter this weekend against Standard Liège, you could back him to put a pretty respectable score up. So he's made the cut for one of the 10 players that will feature this week. The next one, and this is a bit more of a risky play, I will admit, is Christian Ramirez of Krasnodar. He has just come back from a very long injury. I mean, if we look at his scores, he's had a pretty torrid injury record, if we'll be honest. If we roll it back out to all, he's not played a lot in the last couple of years, but when he does play, my, he's capable of some very impressive scores. This weekend, Krasnodar are playing Ural, much weaker side. Really good chance for Ramirez, if he starts, to put up a respectable score. If I'll be honest, it's probably a little bit too early for him to start, but considering his scores, he should hold his eligibility for this tournament for a couple of weeks. So potentially one to add onto your shortlist and consider in the coming weeks. The Orenburg fixture here in game week 298. If he's still qualifying by that time, I think he's probably going to be a standout option because he would have built up a bit more match fitness. But for now, potentially just one to put on your radar and think about in future weeks. As we roll into the midfielders, first one up is Mike Tressor. So there's a lot of change happening at Genk this summer. What really plays into Tresor's hands is that Luca Oyen has unfortunately ruptured his ACL, so he's going to be out. Theo Bongonda seems to have cut his ties with the club. He's going to be out. Junior Ito is linked with a move to Reims. He's probably going to be out. So there's not a lot of attacking depth at Genk, which means that Tresor for me is a nailed-on starter this weekend, just based on the choices that they have. He's up against Standard Liège at home. This is a lovely fixture, and I think Tresor could be a very, very exciting pick this weekend. He is boom or bust, but the booms have come when he has started. He's very decisive dependent. All of these terrible scores were when he was a sub last season. So you think a starter and a favourable fixture this weekend, it should be very, very good conditions for him. Another player to consider is from Belgium, is Elisha Owusu. He came on as a sub last week and put up a really respectable 25-point AA game. So I think he's definitely going to be one player that's pushing for a start this week. In terms of the fixture, Sint-Truiden at home is another one that sort of really stands out. That could be a very, very good fixture for him. If he starts, I think a 50+ score is definitely on the cards. Last but not least for midfielders is Hector Herrera of Houston Dynamo. So he's one of these players that are out of mint and out of sight, out of mind a lot of the time when it comes to these players. He's really not that expensive at 0.02 for a limited. Price has kind of dropped off a little bit recently, along with a lot of America and MLS cards. But if we look at his scores, pretty tasty when he starts. So last week against Minnesota, it put up a 28-point AA game. This weekend is a pretty tough fixture away to Philadelphia, but as a player that garners a bunch of defensive actions, this actually could be a pretty solid game for his AA. I definitely don't think it's one that's likely for a decisive, because Philadelphia are so incredibly strong in defence. But if he can replicate his scores of last week with a 25 to 30-point AA game, definitely puts you in the mix if your stars of your specialist team can hit a high note. Moving on to forward, we've another Krasnodar player, and another player who has very much reappeared on the scene despite his historic scores being far, far more impressive, is Jean Cordoba. If we take a look at his scoring history, he had a bunch of time out of the game, not playing for Krasnodar. He has come back, and last week he put up a pretty decent score for the game when they ultimately lost to Spartak Moscow. This weekend, Ural is a much, much more favourable fixture, so I would not bet against him bagging a decisive. Price-wise, 0.035 currently for limited, which is not bad for a forward that has decisive potential. Next up is another player who is likely to benefit as a result of injury to a teammate. Amand came off injured in the last match. So Noah Ahayo, who was last season on loan at Austria Vienna, he is now at Standard Liège in Belgium. He's an exciting young forward. He's direct. He really does commit man. He's very quick. He's very sharp in and around the box. So he will definitely put the Genk defence under pressure this weekend. It's quite a tough fixture, but Genk they're not the most solid defensively. Let's be honest about that. I'm a Vanderbilt owner, and I have watched through gritted teeth many games where they give away needless goals. You'd hope Walter Veranaken can improve them, but I still wouldn't rule out Standard Liège grabbing a goal in this game, and hopefully Ohio is the sort of player that will be involved in that action. Last but not least is a player who has benefited from a transfer. So Stanislav Iloshenko, he was at Jeonbuk and he was rotating a lot with Gustavo, which is why you see a ton of sub appearances on his score chart. He's now moved to FC Seoul. In a 34-minute sub-appearance last match, he came off the bench, grabbed a goal. He's had a whole 2 weeks to get fit, bring up his match sharpness, and he's going to be extra motivated playing against his old club Pohang. So that's that quick rundown of 10 players to consider for specialist this weekend. Thank you very much.